Sports presents Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another fantastic episode of Benning Bites. I appreciate it. We appreciate you being a part of what we do. There's a lot going on. And it was a fantastic show yesterday. I asked a couple of questions to Sam McEwen and Brady Oltmans. They're a little different in kind of what I was proposing. But for Nebraska, I said, hey, listen, I said to Sam, would you rather be Rick George hiring Deion Sanders, or would you rather have been Bill Moose hiring Coach Frost? And I admitted, I said, hey, listen, to Sam, you have the full power of retrospect. And I think Sam still arrived at knowing what he knows. He still arrived at he'd rather be Bill Moose hiring Coach Frost. And it was weird because Rick George has had to come out again and kind of defend Coach Sanders in terms of the plan and all the articles that have come out. The Athletic did a fantastic piece with Max Olson and Bruce Feldman where they anonymously polled coaches on whether it could work or not. And so everybody has opinions. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I dialed it back down to talk to Brady. I said, would you rather be Matt Rhule heading into the unknown taking over Nebraska, or PJ Fleck with the consistency of being elite at Minnesota with all their turnover? And he said, that's a really good question. He said, normally I would rather be PJ Fleck with the long-term sustainability, but they've had a ton of turnover for what the program brings to the table. And by a lot of turnover, they've had a lot of turnover, right? We've seen Michael Dixon. We've seen Braden Oliver, Trey Potts, Beanie Bishop, Trill Carter, which is going to hurt. I mean, he's a D lineman. Michael Brown-Stevens, who had 22 catches a year ago. And you're like, okay, well, where did they leave? So you got Rutgers and Texas Tech and Penn State and West Virginia and TCU and Texas and South Florida. So it's not like, it's going bottom of the barrel. Now, Coach Fleck has done a good job of trying to plug those holes. Crooms is coming over from Western Michigan. I think Sean Taylor is coming over from Western Michigan, which were both obviously PJ Fleck's old stomping grounds. But the coaching staff has turned over as well. Coach Soraka goes to Rutgers to be with Greg Schiano. You now have co-coordinators with Harbaugh Jr., who had tight ends in 2022, but Mwanabe, the OC and the quarterback's coach. They lost Haynes, who went over, who I just saw when I was in Madison, who's gone over to be with Coach Fickle. Brick Haley left, who coached D-line, who formerly was with Baylor. And I remember, Baylor a long time ago. He was with T. Fraze when they were on Coach Steele's staff. So there's been a lot of turnover. Coach Collins, who's the guy that recruits locally, will coach that position again, but he's now the passing game coordinator at Minnesota. So they've had a ton of turnover. And Nebraska has as well. The well-documented portal departures of guys like A.J. Allen and Casey Thompson. They get guys like Isaiah Garcia Castaneda and Xavier Betts and via the portal, even though they were in the portal after originally leaving the portal at Nebraska, if you follow all that. And, they've had some good additions with M.J. Sherman and some of those guys. But the feeling that I get is that there's a lot of consternation and hand-wringing over starting on the road in Minneapolis. And I think that has probably more to do with the fact that Minnesota has owned Nebraska than the fact that, and we're a little gun-shy, than the fact that we don't think we can win in Minnesota, right? Because you've added Sims and Fleeks and Billy Kemp and Gilbert and Jacob Hood and Ben Scott and Judy and Chief Borders, MJ Sherman Collier. We'll see what happens with Marco Oritz coming over from Florida, right? Well, you've lost quite a few guys. Jaden Gould, Ernest Hausman, Mosai Newsome, Jalen Weaver, Brant Banks, Cavante Grimes, Dakotas Crawford. I mean, they've lost some guys. Hardy, we know, right? Stephon Wynn Jr., James Carney. So we get it, right? Richard Torres, I'm probably leaving out a few. But anyway, that's off the top of my head, so that's as good as I can get. But when I look at this, ask yourselves, is it really a deal where is it because, are we a little gun shy or a little hesitant because it's Nebraska and they haven't won, right? 4-8 and 3-9, and we know, right? Well documented. Is it a culmination of the fact that Minnesota is 7-3 against Nebraska since they've been in the Big Ten? Or are you optimistic because you understand the depth and the magnitude of what Minnesota's lost and you can still acknowledge that it's on the road, but you like the Nebraska direction that they're trending in with the new staff, right? Like, where are you with that? Because I think it's interesting. And it's strange to me that we're like fast forwarding to, Colorado and Dion when Minnesota's had a lot of turnover on their own. So where are we? Are we gun shy and kind of tucking because of our own history? Or are we looking at it like, hey, you know what? The last time we saw Galifianakis, who was Minnesota's quarterback, he running that zone read, and it was killing Nebraska with the QB power game. But we don't think that that's sustainable with what they've had in terms of the long haul. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Two coaches in a very similar fashion that love to – they're culture builders. And I've said this a lot. It doesn't really matter what you want your players or your co-workers or your employees to believe. As long as they believe it and they're moving in the same direction, you give yourself a chance to have some success. So maybe that's where both programs are. Coach Rhule has not sacrificed character over kingdom. I mean, he is going with character through and through and building this roster. Will that be enough in an opener? And we know with Coach Fleck, it's be elite, be elite, be elite. But I'm just curious. Why do we fast forward to what Colorado's doing in terms of their turnover and not pay attention to what's happened to Minnesota in the offseason? Because for what each program had embodied, the consistency of Minnesota and the newness of Colorado, you could make the case that the changes within both programs are kind of equal in their impact. A pretty steady Eddie program in Minnesota has seen a lot of change and a lot of turnover. A brand new program with new leadership in Colorado has had a ton of turnover, but wasn't some of that to be expected? Which was to be more expected? What's happened in Minnesota or what's happened in Colorado? And why do we fast forward to the other when we open with Minnesota? That's the opener. That's the one you got to get. You can't win two without winning one. And you can't win one without getting the first one, right? Another water's wet, watershed moment. Isn't that the way that it goes? It's another episode of Benning Bites. However you get us, make sure you continue to do so. Apple, Google it, Spotify. Man, we need you. Be a part of what we're doing. Stay tuned. Fantastic show coming up. That's Coffee and Cream. Give my man Andrew Rogers a follow. He is at Andrew Rogers CC. And it's another episode of Benning Bites.